I get the great honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Brenda Bowen. Brenda is a professor of geology and geophysics and chair of the atmospheric sciences at the University of Utah. Brenda is the Utah lead on the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine, a national science foundation initiative that aims to elevate the Southwest as a regional hub of economic development catalyzed by sustainability innovation. Today, Brenda will share how the challenges we face in water and climate demand new scales of alignment, collaboration, and innovation. And she will ask the important question, what can our community do to be well prepared to meet the needs and opportunities in the coming decade? Please join me in welcoming Brenda Bowen.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. So good to be here and see all of you here. Thank you again to Lynn Burney and team for again hosting the Watershed Symposium and creating this space for bringing together our community of scientists, managers, educators, and advocates to connect and check in on the progress we're making in advancing the stewardship of our watershed. I've been coming to these gatherings for more than 10 years, and I'm honored to have been invited to give this keynote and kick us off this morning. I was asked to frame, as was just shared, where we are. Where are we going into the future? And what can we do now to help shape what we want this watershed, our home, to look like 10 years from now? On this planetary scale, we can see how unique our Utah landscape is. You can see the white of the Bonneville Basin, the red of the Colorado Plateau. There's really nothing else like it across the hemisphere. So I want to know who's in the room today. Raise your hand if you identify as a scientist. Nice. How about land managers, government employees? You can be more than one thing. Students. Nice. Educators. Policymakers, community organizers, innovators. It gives me hope to be here with all of you today as a part of this community. I am an earth scientist, a researcher, an educator, an organizer, an administrator, and an unrelenting, hopeful optimist. Lately, I've had some reasons to question my optimism and challenge my optimism. And I think part of it comes from my perspective as a geoscientist. I find comfort in planetary timescales where human atrocities are but a blip. But I'm also optimistic because of the good work that I see happening around me every day. Eager students, new tools, new collaborations, enduring partnerships, and profound generosity. We live in a spectacular place, as you all know, and as you can see in this photo taken by an astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Our landscape is shaped by geologic forces over millennia. You can see the Wasatch and Uinta Mountains, the Wasatch Fault dropping out the Basin and Range Mountains crawling up the valleys there, and the great footprint of the Great Salt Lake and the Bonneville Basin. I've had the opportunity over the last decade to study surface processes and sediments in this extreme environment to try to understand how they form, how they're changing, the interactions between the physical landscape, water, and life, from microbes to humans. My work on the Bonneville Salt Flats has really shaped my understanding of the great benefits and extreme challenges of true collaboration between the scientific research community, state and federal land managers, industry, and public stakeholders with a wide range of values and interests. It's been exciting to co-create research with this community. We've been able to provide critical new information about the age of the salts, the evolution of the groundwater, and have helped to identify changes in volume, texture, and composition through time. We found that the salt flats are alive, actively cycling carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur through the crust as microbes and archaea metabolize within salt crystals. We've had collaborations with the state that have led to a new array of eddy flux towers where we've been able to quantify evaporation and potential salt growth rates. We've also developed new ways of characterizing change from satellites, tracking the decline of the salt crust. We worked with social scientists to explore adaptive land use strategies that could allow for coexistence of sometimes conflicting uses. And we worked with artists to ask questions that may not have answers and to talk about things like our feelings. What we can do collectively is so much more than what we can do on our own. The challenges that we face now and into the future are intense. The risks are high for extreme heat, drought, severe storms, and fire risks, and these are projected to get worse into the future. But the impacts of those risks depend on our ability to anticipate, predict, and prepare for those hazards. It depends on our ability to create the support networks that reduce vulnerability and exposure. The challenges that we face with water and climate demand new scales of alignment, collaboration, innovation, and inclusion. Globally and locally, we know that historically marginalized communities contribute less to the cause of climate change, but experience more of its negative impacts. Many of these same communities hold knowledge and cultural practices that offer solutions for reducing and adapting to climate change. There's an urgent need to remove barriers to ensure that everyone has access to clean water, air, and land. This is hard and long work, and the path of progress is not steady or straight, and the outcomes are not ensured. So what does it mean to have hope? I was recently given a book by one of my students, The Book of Hope, a survival guide for trying times by Jane Goodall. Great book, I recommend it. And she talks about what hope is, that it's not a faith, it's more of a stubborn determination. We're not very good at predicting what the future may bring, and we all have the power to shape that path. Hope is a call to action, a self-actualizing process. Lasting hope has to have realistic goals and pathways. We need the confidence that we can achieve those goals, and we need the supports to overcome barriers as we go down that path. So why have hope, according to Jane Goodall? She gives 4 reasons that I think we can consider as we think about where we are and the work that we're doing in our watershed. 1, the amazing human intellect. 2, the power of youth. 3, resilience of nature. And 4, our indomitable human spirit. We see so much evidence of the amazing human intellect across our basin. Abundance and complexity of tools for observing, estimating, tracking water, air, and environment. It's constantly advancing with better and new methods. We have new sensors, new satellites, new innovative ways to measure over dynamic spatial and temporal scales, on trains and on buses, with community science that empowers the public to engage and contribute. We have so much information and are developing new networks to integrate and evaluate big data. Good policy cannot be crafted without good science. I asked my colleague and friend, Paul Brooks, where are you, Paul? Somewhere around here, what he was excited about as we think about where things are. He talked about how we're beginning to really break silos between basic and applied work, collaborating across different agencies and universities, really changing the way we think about the hydrology of the closed basin. He pointed to the new collaborations of the Great Salt Lake Strike Team and their contributions, new research showing us the long-term climate memory in stream flow and groundwater recharge, the large groundwater stores of fresh water that have been identified under pressure just a few meters below the Great Salt Lake. New exploration on dust mitigation that will be essential should we continue to see declining levels of Great Salt Lake. There are new levels of coordination with the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, uniting partners to ensure an ongoing, resilient water supply within the Great Salt Lake Basin. Amazing human intellect is very visible in the infrastructure that supports our watershed. Here you can see us in the underground water treatment facility a few weeks ago up at Snowbird, built into mines that were first created in the 1800s. In 2022, with bipartisan support, the US government authorized the CHIPS and Science Act, legislation to advance innovation in STEM workforce. And in response, the National Science Foundation created the TIP Directorate, a new organization focused on technology, innovation, and partnerships. When TIP leaders were here a few weeks ago, they described to me the fundamental flip in perspective that this program represented, putting broader impacts first and allowing the science to follow in support. The National Science Foundation then launched the Regional Innovation Engines Program, one of the largest investments in US history in region-based research and economic development. It positions science and technology leadership as a primary driver of economic prosperity. Together with collaborators spanning Utah, Arizona, and Nevada, we spent nearly 2 years competing for this award, shaping our vision for the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine, a regional network to align and propel innovation and investment in water, energy, and carbon solutions. In early 2024, we received the award, one of 10 inaugural engines across the US with an investment of up to $160 million over 10 years. We've spent the last 6 months trying to set up and actualize our vision for a new type of fierce, intentional, and inclusive collaboration to align all of our efforts in the same direction. And you'll hear more about Swissy and the engine this afternoon in another talk with my collaborators. The second reason to have hope is the power of youth. Over the last 12 years until this last summer, I had the opportunity to lead the Global Change and Sustainability Center at the University of Utah and had numerous opportunities to witness the power of youth. Here you can see in this photo a group of graduate students at our annual research symposium who had received support from the center smiling up at me. The goal of the Global Change and Sustainability Center was to build and cultivate the interdisciplinary environmental community, recognizing that we each hold a different piece of the puzzle. As we considered what is sustainability research, we came to understand it is place-based, it is applied, it's ecological and social, it's community engaged, it's multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, it's dynamic and iterative, and it's really complex. We were able to empower a generation of graduate students to expand their perspectives and contribute to sustainability through the work of the center, and this gives me hope. We supported 171 seminars, 126 graduate fellowships, 207 student research grants, and 373 student grants for travel to professional meetings. We also hosted retreats, symposia, think tanks, presentations, and projects that spanned all departments and colleges. Students also spurred action that led to the recent University of Utah Climate Action Plan, accelerating the university's target for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 10 years to 2040, in instigating a collaborative process that engaged over 4,000 participants, setting ambitious goals for research, education, mitigation, and resilience. One of my favorite things as a geoscience educator is taking students out into the field and into nature. Here you can see me with my oceans class kayaking on Great Salt Lake, practicing making measurements and observations. This experience practicing science is essential, but there's more to it. These are future politicians, planners, and leaders. I want to provide opportunities for them to unplug and really connect with the natural world. Darren Perry gave a talk last year. Darren, are you here? Darren is a councilman of the Northwest Band of the Shoshone Nation and a University of Utah environmental humanities practitioner in residence. And he was giving a talk quoting the former dean of the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies at Yale. And he said, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. We need so much more than just science." When we think about this from the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine perspective, we're looking at those entering the workforce 10 years from now. Those are third graders. We need to think on generational timescales. Who's invited to the table and who made that table in the first place? Several years ago, a student of mine who was very fond of all kinds of data started digging into STEM faculty demographics at the university. This led to multiple conversations, surveys, data compilation, and finally, after multiple attempts, a 5-year NSF Advanced Institutional Transformation Award that we just finished year 1 of, devoted to enhancing the role of women in the nation's STEM workforce. We're implementing a problem-driven, iterative adaptation approach to establish a process for continually reviewing and reimagining what it might look like across the institution to have equity in policies and community supports that welcome everyone. Good things can happen when we listen to the youth. The third reason for hope is the resilience of nature. Here you can see a photo of Red Butte Canyon, special to many of us at the university as it's adjacent to our campus and has these protected headwaters upstream where the first thing it encounters is the university and connects us at the university to everything downstream. Many of us have collaborated to put in research infrastructure over the years to provide hydrological, meteorological, atmospheric, ecological, and environmental data in this landscape. In fact, I first met Lynn and many others in this room when students at the university decided it was time to do something about Red Butte Creek on campus, literally putting it on the map, moving it from the back of buildings to the front of buildings. If you've been coming to the symposium for years, you've heard Sarah Hinners talk about the Landscape Lab, amazing facility at the university utilizing green infrastructure on the banks of Red Butte Creek to revitalize surface water in our urban outdoor spaces and changing from an irrigation-based landscape to one designed to work like nature, to provide stabilization and filtration, and it's amazing, it works. We see resilience in the diverse habitats supported by the highly managed Great Salt Lake. The sedimentary records below the lake show that the lake has persisted for hundreds of thousands of years through times of extreme climate change. Wet glacial periods, arid times of evaporation, with fluctuations between marsh environments, saline and hypersaline open waters, and on occasion being submerged in deep fresh water. We see the resilience of nature in the way landscapes can recover from even extreme perturbations. Over the last 5 years, I've had the amazing opportunity to contribute to the Returning Rapids Project, together with a large network of partners and support from the Glen Canyon Institute. It was started by a group of river rafters who were noticing the active changes taking place in Cataract Canyon on the Colorado River. When Glen Canyon Dam was built in 1963, it not only held back the waters of the Colorado and San Juan rivers and tributaries, but also all of the sediment loads that were coming down those rivers that had been trapped. With low water levels over the last few years, it's exposed these reservoir sediments, and we've been documenting what's there, what it's doing in the landscape, and how quickly it's evacuating the tributary side canyons. The landscape is changing rapidly and in some very surprising ways. Zach Podmore recently published a book, Life After Deadpool, and he says, "For the first time in my life, nearly all the changes were positive from an ecological perspective. My expectations were being inverted. The bleak pessimism I'd carried for years was beginning to lift. The pockets of life springing up in the side canyons did not follow the usual trajectory of invasive species creeping into diverse ecosystems, but the opposite. An array of native plants quickly crowding out the blankets of thorny tumbleweed and sticky cockleburs. Even the beavers had moved back in, building new dams under the trunks of gray ghost cottonwoods that still bore the marks of their ancestors' incisors. If environmental change can move in both directions, over the brink and back again, then the nihilistic impulse to shun humanity as a whole might be tamped down." In addition to our ingenuity, the power of youth, and the resilience of nature, the final reason Jane Goodall gives for having hope is the indomitable human spirit. She defines this as the quality in us that makes us tackle what seems impossible and never give up. Our mission for the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine is not only to prepare the Southwest and its citizens to survive, but to thrive. We aim to create a dynamic ecological and social ecosystem across the region that generates wealth in a way that supports environmental progress. I want to say that again. Generate wealth in a way that supports environmental progress. We recognize that our goals are wildly ambitious, but we have to believe that there's going to be a marvelous outcome after a decade because of us. We'll build the community of practices with many different strengths, connecting providers to needs, creating tools and making them available, making sure they meet the needs of the users. Get cutting-edge good science into the hands of decision makers. Create safe spaces for high-risk innovation. Here in the photo, you can see us on the shores of Great Salt Lake a couple of months ago as we were explaining to the National Science Foundation the great potential for this work across the Wasatch Front and our watershed. So as we listen and learn from each other over the next 2 days, I invite you to consider how we, as a community, as a watershed, can join forces in a new way. Meet someone new, rekindle a lasting partnership. Think about what we can do to make our work less competitive and more complementary. Consider what you need personally to do to be persistent, to keep going with obstinate determination. Every single individual here has a role to play every day. Desmond Tutu said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness, and our actions create that light." I invite you to join me in working to cultivate a sincere hope for the future of our watershed. Thank you.